Now, restaurants could be prevented from holding back tips intended for their waiting staff if a new private members' bill is passed through Parliament in the coming months. Dean Russell, the Conservative MP, is bringing this forward, and he joins me now. Hi, Dean. Tell me, why have you decided to bring this bill?
Well, for me, it's a thing of fairness, really. So if you go to a restaurant or get your hair cut, you will undoubtedly end that with a tip, which you would expect would go to the member of staff, or perhaps would be pooled and shared across all the staff, perhaps including those behind the scenes. But some businesses don't actually enable the staff to keep all of that. And some businesses see that as part of the payment for the service. And so the bill effectively is saying that if a tip is given, that tip should be given to the staff, or an agreement needs to be in place to ensure that the staff can share that, and it's all agreed how that would be done. And that makes sure that, tips and gratuities are given to the people that have been given it, that there's a fairness in the process, but also it's a way to help actually people who are expecting that money to come to them, to make sure that they've got the rights to ensure that happens through employment law.
What's your time frames that you're hoping to get this concluded by?
So the second reading is in September, and at that point I'll be doing what's called the second reading, which is to sort of talk in more detail about what the bill would include, so the legalities of it, which I'm working through at the moment. But the premise of it really is that the original idea of the TIPS bill, or something around legislation, actually came in through the Conservative manifesto, and also has been mentioned in the Queen's speech in 2019. So what I'm trying to do is just really urge that we continue to push on this, that we do make it part of the law, and that we make sure that there's a fair system for people who work in that economy. In somewhere like Watford, where I represent, there's a huge hospitality industry here, and that means there's an awful lot of people who work in the hospitality industry. And so I just want to make sure that they're being represented, their voices are being heard, but also that their rights are protected when this hopefully comes in, which I would hope would come in the next year or two, if I'm really fortunate with the campaign and with the bill.
And Dean, some people might say, whilst this is a noble effort, if people are concerned about restaurant staff, etc., getting the money that's intended for them, why don't you just raise the minimum wage and make sure these people are paid more?
No, I hear that, but I think the culture of tipping has been around in this country for many, many years, and you don't say what are you earning before giving someone a tip. So this isn't about saying let's incorporate tips into their wage. Hopefully people will be paid a fair wage, and that's absolutely important. But actually, this isn't about, and there's already laws to say that tips should not contribute to one's wages. This is about the opportunity for when people do give a tip, when they do want to thank someone for their service, when they've gone over and above in many cases, that actually they get something. And really, this is just about making sure that the worker, the employee, has the right to say, actually, that's my money, not for the business to say, actually, that we're going to keep that. And I think putting that in a way that's very fair for everybody, that's absolutely clear, but also protects people's rights, for me, just feels like a very obvious solution to something that increasingly is a challenge. Because one of the problems now is that we're increasingly more of a cashless society. So in the past, you might have given a note or a few coins at the end of a meal, or after getting your haircut, or whatever those things where you would tip. But actually, increasingly, that's now happening via credit cards. And I have some concerns about cashless societies, especially for older people. But when you look at it within this context, actually, if you're paying for a tip via credit card, there's no easy way for a member of staff to say, actually, that bit was for me or intended for me. And this law would help sort of close that gap to make sure there's surety and there's fairness in the system.
Question to you. If you do manage to make this basically law, how will you police this basically? How will you make sure that restaurants are doing what they're supposed to?
Well, first of all, I think, I don't want to make businesses and restaurants and so on the bad guy here. Most do follow the guidance. Most of them are fair, and most of them do this already. But for those who don't, the bill itself would be enshrined in employee law. So it would be the employee's right to say, actually, that's my money you've got there, please give it back, as it were. But ultimately, this is about making sure that employees have the right to say, actually, that tip was intended for me or was intended for the employees, to make sure that they can ask for that. And between now and hopefully getting this law in place, I intend to continue lobbying and actually speaking more to businesses. I have a small business ambassador role. And so speaking to businesses to talk about the importance of this, to make sure that they are putting fair practices in place. And hopefully, I'd love it to be that a law isn't needed. I'm not one for putting legislation in for the sake of it, but I think, especially with this point about a cashless society, making sure employees' rights are protected means that those businesses that perhaps aren't doing that, the employees are able to make a fair ask within their rights.
Dean Russell, thank you very much for your time now.